She needs to lose weight in 3 days, Ethan. Those are the rules. Patricia Calloway, president of our HOA board, said it like she was announcing a verdict, not humiliating my wife on our own front porch. Her manicure gleamed as she shoved the paper into my chest. The bold print at the top read, Health Compliance Notice, stamped with the Willow Heights seal. 3 days to improve appearance in line with community wellness standards. Behind her, a couple walking their dog slowed to watch. Patricia smiled wider, proud of the spectacle she'd created. It's not personal, she added, voice syrupy, but your wife's condition reflects poorly on our community's image. My wife, Marissa, stood frozen behind the screen door. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at Patricia and said quietly, "You might want to read your own charter before threatening medical patients." Her smirk faltered. "Medical patients?" she repeated, but I was already looking at the letterhead, tracing the signature line that bore her name. You just signed something that doesn't legally exist. The way her smile twitched told me she didn't understand the danger yet. If you've ever watched someone abuse power right in front of your home and wanted to see justice hit back fast, subscribe right now. This one's personal, and it moves fast. My name's Ethan Ward. I'm a licensed physical therapist, certified in clinical compliance and injury rehabilitation. I run a small clinic out of town and help post-surgery patients rebuild their lives. Slowly, carefully, my wife used to be one of them. 2 years ago, a car crash left her spine and confidence shattered. She fought her way back step by step until she could walk, laugh, and plant roses in our front yard again. I bought this house because the community gym offered accessibility, because she deserved normal. I never thought that same gym would become the weapon used against her. Patricia Calloway, for all her pearl necklaces and pastel dresses, ruled Willow Heights like a branding campaign. She called it visual harmony. Every hedge trimmed the same height, every home painted in one of 3 approved tones. And now, apparently, every resident was expected to maintain physical decorum for the sake of property values. When she handed me that notice, she wasn't enforcing a rule, she was enforcing her vanity. But she had no idea what line she just crossed. I stared at the signature again, steadying my breath. Marissa's reflection shimmered faintly on the glass behind me, hand pressed to her chest. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that my wife, recovering from spinal trauma, has 72 hours to meet your personal fitness expectations?" Patricia folded her arms. "We all have to do our part, Mr. Ward. If she can't participate in the wellness parade, it sends the wrong message to future buyers." The paper in my hand trembled once, before I crumpled it. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that I'd spent years buried in legal paperwork, fighting to keep medical rehab centers compliant with state health regulations. I knew exactly what a legitimate directive looked like. And this wasn't it. The language alone, visual compliance, public image fitness, resident responsibility to aesthetic cohesion, was a Frankenstein of unfiled nonsense. It didn't belong to any real bylaw I'd ever seen. But the worst part wasn't the insult. It was watching Marissa retreat. She turned away from the door, her shoulders shaking, the light from the foyer catching the scars along her back. That's when my anger solidified into something colder. Patricia didn't just hand me an order. She handed me her own noose. I looked her dead in the eye. "You just issued a compliance notice under Article 7.3, right?" She blinked, uncertain. "That's exterior maintenance?" I said. "You think people count as property?" For the first time, she hesitated, and I smiled, not kindly. "You'll want to fix that." When she walked off, heels clicking against the polished stone path, I felt the familiar hum in my chest that comes before a long fight, the one that used to hit before I faced insurance auditors or legal hearings. I glanced back at Marissa. Her face was pale, her breath uneven. "She can't do this to us," she whispered. "She already did," I said quietly. But she didn't do it right. The next morning, I watched the notice burn in our fire pit. The ashes curled like dead leaves. Patricia thought this was about weight, about image, about one woman she could shame into submission. She had no idea what she'd just started, because the one thing I know better than muscle recovery is how to make paperwork scream. The next morning, the ashes were still cold in the fire pit when the gossip started. Word travels fast in Willow Heights, faster than truth, faster than decency. By the time I walked to the community mail pavilion, people were already whispering. A copy of the health compliance notice had been pinned to the bulletin board beside the HOA's pet waste reminder. Someone had circled Marissa's name in red marker. I could hear the small talk turn sharp as I passed. 3 days? That's not unreasonable. Well, appearances do matter here. Patricia just wants the neighborhood to stay professional. They weren't neighbors anymore. They were an audience. The notice had done its job. Patricia Calloway stood by the gym entrance, holding a clipboard like a badge of authority. She was talking to the community's yoga instructor about upgrading aesthetics for Wellness Week. When she noticed me, she smiled as if we were still pretending to be civil. "Ethan, how's Marissa holding up?" she asked loudly enough for everyone around to hear. I kept my jaw steady. "You've turned her medical recovery into a headline," I said quietly. "You violated privacy laws doing it." Her smile thinned. "We're simply maintaining community standards. You of all people should understand professional accountability." The yoga instructor looked away. Patricia turned, dismissing me mid-sentence, and waved for someone to remove the bulletin notice. Too late, the damage was done. I walked home slower than usual, reading every posted rule I passed. Lawn maintenance ordinance. Approved trim heights. Driveway stain removal policy. They were all written in the same language, precise, approved, and filed. But Patricia's health compliance memo, that one looked like it had been printed from her home office. No reference number, no filing date, no legal clause. She'd crafted a weapon out of thin air. And now, watching how easily people followed, I realized this wasn't her first time. That night, Marissa refused to step outside. The blinds stayed shut, and her phone stayed face down on the counter. She'd seen the comments online, neighbors joking about her violation. I tried to speak, but she cut me off, voice trembling. "You don't get it, Ethan. She made me the example." I did get it. I'd seen that same despair in patients who felt their bodies had betrayed them. But this wasn't biology. This was cruelty dressed as policy. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Willow Heights Charter PDFs. Years ago, I'd helped clinics navigate compliance audits. I knew how to read language like a scalpel. Most HOAs relied on boilerplate templates written by real estate lawyers. Any amendment had to follow a state filing protocol before enforcement. Patricia's letter had none of that. I scrolled through section after section until I found Article 7.3, the one she cited. Exterior maintenance. All homes and visible property must be maintained in the good repair and visual harmony. That's all it said. No mention of residents, no wellness clause, no personal upkeep. She'd twisted exterior property into personal appearance. That wasn't governance. That was vanity masquerading as law. I highlighted the clause and sent it to myself as a note. Then I wrote one line beneath it. Find the record of amendment. If Patricia really believed this rule existed, there should be paperwork, board minutes, an approval vote, and a county filing. I'd find all three, or I'd prove she'd forged her own authority. 2 days later, at the gym, I noticed the first cracks in her empire. A couple of neighbors avoided eye contact when she walked by. Others whispered near the treadmills. I caught fragments. Overstepped, lawsuit, discrimination. Even the yoga instructor had quit, citing ethical discomfort. Patricia was still smiling, but her voice had lost its sharpness. When she saw me stretching near the window, she pretended not to. That's when I noticed Liam Porter, standing near the reception desk, clipboard in hand, watching quietly. He looked uneasy, trapped. I could tell he wanted to speak, but not here, not with Patricia nearby. His eyes flicked toward me, then down at the schedule. I gave a slight nod and left without a word. It wasn't time yet, but I knew the look, someone caught between truth and survival. Back home, I printed the HOA charter and began marking the gaps. Every line that didn't match Patricia's memo, every place she'd overwritten meaning. I taped it all on my office wall, a puzzle of her lies. Marissa stepped in, watching silently. "You're really doing this," she whispered. "I'm not letting her win on paper," I said. "She built her power out of words. I'll break it the same way." Outside, porch lights flickered on across the neighborhood, one by one, uniform, identical, perfect. But behind those tidy lawns, fear was spreading. Patricia thought she'd humiliated one woman. She hadn't realized she'd just turned the entire community into witnesses. And witnesses talk. By the end of the week, the air in Willow Heights felt heavier. Patricia's health-compliance stunt had shifted from rumor to quiet unease. Neighbors waved from a distance now, careful not to linger. The HOA newsletter arrived that morning with a new feature, Resident Spotlight, promoting wellness through responsibility. There was no name attached, but the subtext was sharp enough to cut. It was about Marissa. I read it once, folded it, and set it aside. The plan was working. Patricia was growing careless with her arrogance. But to prove her fraud, I needed an insider. That's when I decided to find Liam Porter. He wasn't easy to corner. Property managers in communities like ours operated like ghosts, always present, never available. But that evening, I spotted him at the neighborhood fountain, clipboard in one hand, phone pressed to his ear. His back was straight, but his foot tapped anxiously against the pavement. When he saw me, his shoulders tightened, and he ended the call too quickly. He didn't smile. "Ethan," he said, voice low, glancing around. "You shouldn't—" He stopped, swallowing whatever warning had started forming. I walked closer. "You work for Patricia," I said, "but you know this health standard isn't real." His eyes flicked toward the HOA office across the street, the windows glowing warm against the dusk. "You can't just say that out loud," he muttered. The clipboard shifted from one hand to the other. His fingers tapped the edge nervously, like he was counting seconds until someone noticed. He was young, late 20s maybe, but already carried the weary posture of someone buried under quiet compromise. "I manage records," he said. "I don't make policy." His tone was defensive, but his stance betrayed him. Jaw clenched, shoulders slightly turned away, as if bracing for a hit. "But you do see the policies?" I pressed. "You'd know if there was ever a vote on this health clause." He didn't answer, but his silence said enough. A car rolled by slowly, headlights flashing across his face. He blinked hard, using the movement to glance over his shoulder. No one was near, but his body still read fear. "She said it was approved last quarter," I said. "There's no filing, no signature record, nothing on the state ledger. If she's falsifying HOA law, that's fraud." He exhaled through his nose, tension running down his arms. "You didn't hear that from me," he said. "Patricia told me to record it in the minutes after the last board session. There was no quorum. 2 members were absent, and the secretary refused to sign. She told me to file it anyway. I didn't. I couldn't." His grip on the clipboard tightened until the plastic creaked. "If I admit that, I lose my contract. Property management firms blacklist whistleblowers." "Then don't admit it yet," I said. "Just don't destroy those drafts. That's all I'm asking." His throat bobbed. "You think this will end with paperwork? She's connected. The developer's wife is her sister. You go after her, she'll make it hell for you." I smiled faintly. "I've been audited by insurance boards, Liam. Hell stopped scaring me years ago." That earned a small, nervous laugh, the kind that hides admiration under exhaustion. "You're serious," he said. "Dead serious," I replied. He looked back toward the HOA office again. The fountain light flickered across his face, half in shadow, half in guilt. "You're not wrong," he said softly. "But if I give you anything, it has to stay quiet. She reads everything. She checks cameras. She even screens outgoing mail from the office." His voice trembled at the edges, like every word was a confession he didn't plan to make. I could see the moral war happening inside him. His shoulders kept twitching toward the office like invisible strings were tugging him back. "Liam," I said, keeping my tone level, "you didn't write those rules. You're just stuck enforcing them. But if she's lying to the state, you're the one who'll take the fall, not her." He froze, realization hitting like a flash. For a second, the clipboard dropped slightly in his hand. Then he straightened, eyes narrowing, not in defiance, but in decision. "Give me a few days," he whispered. "I'll see what I can find. But if this comes back to me—" "It won't," I said. "You have my word." When he walked away, I watched the tension linger in his movements, the slight hunch of his shoulders, the uneven pace of his steps, the way he kept glancing back at the office windows. That wasn't guilt anymore. It was fear turning into resolve. By the time I got home, the sky had darkened into a heavy violet. Marissa was asleep on the couch, the folded newsletter on the table beside her. I looked at it one more time, then at the notes on my wall. Patricia had built her empire on signatures and silence, but silence was cracking, and Liam Porter had just decided which side he was on. The next day, Patricia struck back. She always did when control slipped through her fingers. By noon, a new HOA email hit every inbox in Willow Heights. Subject line: Community Health Update, Enforcement of Standards. It listed a dozen names, each fined for non-participation in Wellness Week events. Marissa's name sat at the top, bolded. Below it, a note: resident barred from facility access pending compliance review. The community gym, our only safe space for her recovery, was now off limits. Patricia didn't just want obedience, she wanted humiliation codified. I was at the clinic when Marissa called, her voice shaking. "My key fob isn't working," she said. "They said I'm suspended from using the gym." My throat tightened. "Who told you that?" Patricia herself. She was there waiting. I could hear the tears she was trying to hide. "She said it's for my own safety until I meet the standard." Ethan, she had people watching. I drove home faster than I should have. When I reached the community gym, Patricia was standing in the lobby, clipboard in hand, talking to a small crowd about liability coverage. Her voice carried the confidence of someone who believed rules only existed when she wrote them. I stepped through the door, ignoring the hush that fell around us. "Unlock her access," I said. She didn't turn. "Residents under non-compliance orders are temporarily restricted," she said smoothly, her tone rehearsed. "Our insurance requires it." "Your insurance?" I said, stepping closer. "Or your pride?" She finally looked at me, smiling like I'd confirmed her authority. "If you have concerns, file an appeal. The board will review it after the event." Marissa stood near the vending machine, trying to disappear behind her gym bag. The sight of her trembling hands, the way she avoided everyone's eyes, carved something deep inside me. Patricia glanced her way and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "We all just want what's best for her health." I leaned in just enough for her to lose her smile. "You're manufacturing a lawsuit, Patricia." She blinked, unbothered. "I'm maintaining property value." Her tone was so calm, it almost made me laugh. Almost. I turned to the security keypad, held my phone up, and took a picture of the access log display, time-stamped with her override authorization. That was the first piece of proof. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some neighbors stared at the floor, others at their phones. Liam was there too, standing near the reception desk, arms crossed tight, face pale. His eyes met mine briefly before darting away. I could see the guilt written in every line of his posture, shoulders hunched forward, weight shifting. Between feet like he wanted to intervene but couldn't. Patricia's eyes caught the movement and she snapped, "Mr. Porter, please remind all residents that interference with enforcement constitutes misconduct." He nodded without speaking, fingers tightening on his clipboard until the paper inside wrinkled. That small tremor told me he'd seen enough. I stepped back, not wanting to give her the satisfaction of another scene. "Fine," I said quietly. "We'll follow procedure." Patricia's smirk returned instantly, as if she'd won something real. But while she gloated, I was already thinking about the next step, documenting her procedural errors. Every order she issued without ratification, every penalty tied to an unfiled rule, was illegal under Texas HOA law. She'd given me more ammunition than she realized. That night, Marissa sat on the couch, knees drawn to her chest. The gym bag was still by the door, untouched. "She's not just punishing me," she said softly. "She's telling everyone they're next if they don't look perfect." I knelt beside her. "Then we'll make sure everyone sees what she really is." I printed the gym access photo and pinned it next to the fake charter notes on my office wall. The pattern was forming. Patricia's empire wasn't built on law, but repetition. She declared rules, enforced them loudly, and nobody questioned the paperwork because they were afraid to. Until now. Across the street, her house lights burned late into the night. Through the window, I saw her silhouette pacing with a phone pressed to her ear. She was already tightening control, maybe sensing resistance. Good. Fear made people reckless, and reckless people left trails. The next morning, I got a message from Liam. No greeting, just 3 words that made me stop cold. She changed the minutes. He'd finally crossed the line from observer to participant. Patricia thought the gym incident had silenced me, but it had only given me my first piece of evidence, and a witness willing to risk everything to expose her. Liam's text hit my phone before dawn. She changed minutes. I read it twice. the words sinking like ice water through my chest. Patricia wasn't just enforcing fake rules anymore. She was rewriting history to make them real. I sat at my desk, staring at the evidence board on my wall, the tangled web of notices, bylaws, and timelines. Every false step she took was documented there, but now she was erasing her own footprints. I needed to see what she'd altered before she buried it deeper. By 7, I was at my clinic, using my break room as a war room. The clinic had become my refuge. Quiet, sterile, methodical. I logged into the county's HOA filings portal, using my compliance account. One I'd used 100 times before to verify medical zoning regulations. If Patricia had legally amended any clause, it would appear there under bylaw revisions. The search field blinked back at me. Waiting, I typed Willow Heights Association. The result loaded instantly. Only 3 registered filings in the last 5 years, all related to landscaping and parking enforcement. Nothing about wellness, fitness, or resident presentation. No Article 7.3 addendum. No health compliance standards. She'd fabricated an entire rule out of thin air and never filed it with the county. My fingers tightened around the edge of the desk. This was the flaw. This was the technical kill shot. The legal hole big enough to swallow her authority whole. I printed the records, stamping them with a system-generated verification seal. For the first time since this started, I felt the ground tilt back in my favor. Then I remembered Liam's message. If Patricia was altering meeting minutes, that meant she'd realized she needed cover. The only record that could legitimize her fake wellness policy was an HOA meeting vote, and if she couldn't get the real one, she'd just invent it. I grabbed my phone and called him. He answered on the 3rd ring, voice strained and quiet. "Ethan, I don't have long. She's rewriting the digital minutes right now. She told me to finalize them before she uploads to the resident portal." "Can you stop her?" I asked. "If I touch the document, she'll know I looked. Everything's time-stamped, but she's making a mistake." His voice shook slightly. "She doesn't know I already archived the original file before she started editing. It's stored locally on the HOA office drive." "That's your leverage," I said. "Hold on to it, make sure it's safe." He hesitated. "If she finds out I copied anything—" "She won't," I interrupted. "I'll handle the exposure. You just keep that file intact." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of shuffling papers came through the line, and then Liam whispered, "She's obsessed with control, Ethan. You can't reason with her. She believes this community is her reflection." I almost laughed. "Then we'll use the mirror against her." After the call, I spread the printed filings across my desk like pieces of a puzzle. Patricia's fake notice cited approved policy language that didn't legally exist. Under Texas law, HOA amendments must be filed with the county clerk and notarized before enforcement. Without that filing, every fine she issued was void, every restriction unenforceable. The state had built these technical safeguards for a reason, to prevent exactly this kind of abuse. Patricia's arrogance had blinded her to the legal details. By afternoon, I drafted a preliminary complaint addressed to the Travis County Property Compliance Division. I included the verified registry printouts and outlined the discrepancy between the HOA's internal minutes and official records. My clinic printer hummed steadily, spitting out page after page of quiet ammunition. I placed them neatly in a folder labeled Willow Heights Unfiled Bylaw Complaint. It wasn't ready to send yet, not without Liam's archived minutes, but the skeleton was there. Outside my window, rain began to fall, steady, rhythmic, cleansing. It pattered against the glass as if punctuating every thought. I leaned back, letting the sound fill the silence. This was what Patricia didn't understand. You can bully people into silence, but you can't bully systems forever. The law may be slow, but it remembers. When I got home that night, Marissa was sitting by the fireplace reading the same HOA newsletter that had mocked her days ago. But this time, her expression wasn't sadness. It was resolve. "Did you find anything?" she asked. "Enough to end her," I said. She smiled faintly. "Then do it." I nodded, feeling the weight of every page waiting on my desk. The first step was done. The foundation of Patricia Calloway's rule was hollow, and now I had proof of it. She could edit minutes, threaten neighbors, and hide behind her polished smile, but the law she claimed to represent was already turning against her. All I needed now was one brave witness to stand beside the truth. and Liam Porter had just volunteered himself for history. The following morning, I woke to the sound of rain still tapping the windows and the faint vibration of my phone. A new email alert flashed on screen. Subject line, HOA fine enforcement notice. Patricia had doubled down again. $2,000 this time, citing defamation against board officials and failure to maintain positive community spirit. She'd turned harassment into paperwork. I stared at the figure until the digits blurred, then exhaled slowly. She wasn't trying to win legally anymore. She was trying to exhaust us. Marissa walked into the kitchen, her hair pulled into a loose braid, eyes red from another sleepless night. "She find us again?" she asked, already knowing the answer. I nodded, sliding the email toward her. "She's panicking," I said. "That's good." Marissa leaned against the counter, her voice quieter. "It doesn't feel good." I didn't respond because she was right. Victory always looked cleaner from the outside. From here, it just felt heavy. I spent that afternoon at a cafe downtown, a place outside Willow Heights where the air didn't taste like fear. The small table by the window became my temporary command post. Laptop open, coffee cooling, I drafted the formal complaint to the county oversight office. This was the part that mattered most, turning proof into process. Patricia's arrogance had given me her entire undoing, but bureaucracy demanded precision. I listed every fake clause, every unauthorized fine, every unfiled health standard. I attached scanned documents with timestamps, and in the final section, I wrote a single sentence that sealed her fate. The HOA board has enacted and enforced an amendment that does not legally exist under county record. Still, I hesitated before hitting send. Not because I doubted the case, but because of what it would cost Liam. His testimony would be the cornerstone. Without it, the complaint might stall. With it, he'd be risking his career. I opened my phone and texted him. "We're ready." "Are you?" No reply. Hours passed. I stayed in that cafe until the rain stopped and the sky turned amber behind the city skyline. When my phone finally buzzed, it was a voicemail, Liam's voice, low and tense. "She knows, Ethan. She confronted me about the file, said she got an access alert. I told her it was a system glitch, but she didn't buy it. She's locking me out of the office drive. I'm sorry." I gripped the edge of the table. Patricia was cornered and lashing out. Exactly what I needed, but the cost was starting to show. I called him immediately. He answered after a long silence. His voice shook. "She threatened to call corporate, said I'd breached confidentiality. I can't keep this up." "You don't have to," I said. "Just stay put. If she revokes your access, that's tampering with evidence. Let her make the next move." When I hung up, I added another line to my report draft. Attempted digital concealment of internal records following discovery of procedural misconduct. Then I pressed send. The submission confirmation flashed across the screen, small and simple, but it felt like a gunshot through glass. That night, I came home later than usual. Marissa was sitting at the dining table, surrounded by half-burned candles, a small bowl of soup untouched beside her. "Did you send it?" she asked. I nodded. "It's official. The county will audit within the week." She exhaled, eyes glistening. "Then we wait." But waiting wasn't easy. The next morning, Patricia went on the offensive. A mass email went out to all residents titled Community Misinformation Alert. She accused an unnamed party of spreading false claims about the HOA board, warning that legal measures will be pursued. My inbox exploded with forwarded copies from concerned neighbors, half supporting her, half skeptical. The war had gone public. Later that evening, I was invited, by requirement, to a special board meeting at the HOA office. Patricia's tactic was obvious: intimidation. The meeting was set for 3 days later. It would be the first time she faced me since the gym incident. As the sun dipped low, I walked the perimeter of Willow Heights, the manicured lawns, the silent driveways, the symmetry. It all looked perfect, like a stage set for control. But cracks were forming. The yoga instructor who'd quit waved to me from her porch. Another neighbor whispered, "Good luck," as I passed. The silence that once protected Patricia was breaking apart. When I reached home, Liam's car was parked outside. He stood near my porch light, shoulders hunched, eyes darting like he'd been followed. "She fired me," he said before I could speak. His voice was hollow. but I backed up the file to my personal drive first. You were right. She forged the minutes. I felt something shift between us, fear giving way to courage. Then it's over, I said. Not yet, he murmured. She's planning something before the audit. She called an emergency vote tomorrow night. The final stage was beginning. Patricia thought she could still control the script, but I'd already rewritten the ending. Liam's words echoed through the porch light's hum. She's planning something before the audit. He looked pale, rain-soaked, and restless, glancing down the street as if Patricia herself might materialize from the shadows. I motioned for him to come inside before any neighbors saw us talking. He hesitated at the door, his fingers twitching near his jacket pocket, the telltale rhythm of someone fighting guilt and fear all at once. When he finally stepped in, he kept his voice low. She called an emergency session tomorrow night, claims it's to ratify previous amendments for record clarity. That's code for covering her tracks. I shut the door and leaned against it. So she's going to legitimize the fake wellness policy retroactively, I said. If she can pass it now, the county audit can't prove it was illegal before. Liam nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. She's rewriting the vote history, and I helped her without realizing it. He sank into the armchair like gravity had finally caught up with him. Last month, she told me to pre-fill attendance logs before the meeting, said the board had already confirmed votes via email. I thought it was procedural prep work, nothing major. But when she uploaded the final minutes, she kept those yes votes in and deleted the absentees. The system timestamp made it look unanimous. His jaw tightened. That was my login, Ethan, my credentials. If the state checks metadata, it'll look like I falsified the record. I moved closer, lowering my tone. You didn't, and you can prove that. He shook his head, defeated. Only if I hand over the backup file I made before she edited it. But once I do, I'm done in property management. Nobody hires whistleblowers. Marissa appeared quietly from the hallway, a blanket draped around her shoulders. Her voice was soft, but steady. Then, don't think of it as whistleblowing, she said. Think of it as saving everyone else she's going to hurt next. Liam couldn't meet her eyes. He just stared at the coffee table, where a stack of HOA mail sat unopened. His fingers tapped once, twice, then froze. You have no idea what she's capable of, he whispered. She has people on her side, other board members, the developer's sister-in-law. If this goes public, she'll crush me. I pulled out the folder from my briefcase and set it in front of him. Not if she's already falling. I flipped it open to the county filings I'd printed the day before, the ones proving no amendment was ever submitted. This is the foundation, I said, but it's your file that finishes it. Together, they prove the board's actions were void from inception. That means every fine, every suspension, every threat, gone. He stared at the documents like they were something radioactive. If I turn that over, it'll trace back to me. She'll know I copied the drive. I nodded. Probably, but by then, it won't matter. The county compliance office takes custody once the complaint's verified. She can't touch you after that. Tampering post-audit is a criminal act. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the faint crackle from the fireplace. Then Liam exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and surrender. He pulled a small USB drive from his pocket, gripping it tightly before setting it down on the table. That's the original minutes, he said, dated before she rewrote anything. It shows 2 board members objected and the secretary refused to sign. There's even a note she dictated herself, expedite without quorum. I kept it because something in my gut told me she'd try this. His voice cracked. I didn't want to believe I was right. Marissa reached over and covered his hand. You did the right thing, even before you knew it. His shoulders dropped, the fight slowly leaving him. I'll send you a copy, he said quietly. But after this, I'm out. I can't live under her shadow anymore. That's fine, I said. You've already done enough. He stood, glancing toward the window where the rain had started again, reflecting the amber porch light in trembling streaks. She's not going to take this quietly, he said. Tomorrow's meeting, she'll use it to spin the narrative before you expose her. Let her, I replied. The county already has the complaint. By the time she speaks, they'll be listening. Liam hesitated one last time before opening the door. If she finds out I talked to you, I'll deny everything. I gave a small nod. Understood. He paused, then looked back. But thank you. for not making me the villain in my own story. Then he was gone, swallowed by the rain. I turned the USB drive over in my palm. It was small, unremarkable, ordinary, yet heavy enough to crush the empire Patricia Calloway had built. Tomorrow's meeting wouldn't be her victory rally. It would be her undoing. The USB drive sat on my desk like a live charge. Every few seconds, I caught myself staring at it, half expecting it to melt under the weight of what it contained. Patricia thought the upcoming emergency meeting would give her the final word, but she didn't know I'd already sent the complaint, with Liam's confession cued as the final exhibit. All I needed now was to finish the package, tighten every procedural knot, and make sure there were no cracks for her to slip through. I drove to my clinic, the one place she couldn't reach me. My assistant had left hours earlier. The front desk sat dark except for the glow from my laptop. I plugged in the USB drive, pulse steady but slow, like before a long surgery. The file opened with a neat timestamp, 3 weeks old. The header read, Meeting Minutes, March HOA Session. Below it, Patricia's name appeared in bold as Acting Chair. Her edits were visible in the metadata, like fingerprints, removals, insertions, overwrites. Lines that once read, Discussion postponed pending full attendance, now said, Motion passed unanimously. She hadn't even bothered to mask the changes. Arrogance always left a trail. I scrolled further until I saw the line that would end her career. Dictated note by President Calloway. Expedite amendment approval despite absence of quorum. My breath left me in a single, controlled exhale. She'd written her own confession into the record. I printed the document and slid it into the growing file beside the county verification forms. Together, they formed a perfect sequence. Her fraud, her method, and the absence of any legal filing. The state oversight office wouldn't even need a hearing to act. But I wanted one. Patricia built her authority on spectacle, humiliation as performance. And she deserved her downfall under the same lights she used to shame others. By midnight, the clinic was silent except for the hum of the HVAC system. I drafted my final step, a formal letter requesting the county compliance officer to attend the emergency meeting as an observing party. Under the law, any resident under formal complaint could request oversight presence during a board proceeding. It was a small clause, tucked deep within HOA code, one Patricia clearly hadn't read. I highlighted the statute, attached the supporting evidence, and hit send. It was done. The stage was set. When I stepped outside, the storm had passed, but the air still smelled of ozone and wet asphalt. The streets shimmered under the streetlights. I could almost see Willow Heights from the hill, the perfect rows of identical roofs, the illusion of order. I thought about Marissa, about the nights she'd stood in that gym watching her reflection with quiet disgust, believing she wasn't enough because one woman said so. Tomorrow she'd watch Patricia's mask slip in front of everyone. That mattered more than any fine reversed or policy repealed. The next morning, I worked out of the public library downtown, surrounded by quiet and the faint hum of printers. I spent hours cross-referencing county codes, double-checking citations, rehearsing the structure of the confrontation. I wasn't just attending the meeting as a resident. I'd be walking in as the one man who understood every line of the law she'd broken. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She's calling people, trying to stack the room with her supporters. Says you're spreading lies. I didn't need to ask who sent it. The message carried Liam's tone. My fingers flew over the keyboard. Letter. The county's already watching. At home that evening, Marissa helped me arrange the papers on the kitchen table, like we were preparing for trial. You sure you're ready for this? She asked. I've been ready since the day she taped that notice to our door, I said. She smiled faintly. Then don't hold back. I packed the file neatly into a leather binder. On top, I placed a printed copy of Patricia's forged minutes, the one Liam risked everything to preserve. I could still see his trembling hands as he'd passed me the drive, the haunted look of someone who'd been living under quiet blackmail for too long. Tomorrow, that weight would lift. As the sun fell behind the houses, porch lights blinked on across Willow Heights in perfect sync, a chorus of identical illumination. It was the illusion Patricia had always wanted, uniformity mistaken for peace. But inside those homes, people were starting to whisper, starting to wonder if the Queen of Order had finally overplayed her hand. I locked the binder in my briefcase and turned off the lights. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't just a confrontation, it was a correction. Every false rule she'd written, every humiliation she'd imposed, would collapse under the same structure she'd built to protect herself. I didn't plan to yell or gloat. I planned to read her own words back to her, and let silence do the rest. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds like thin lines of gold cutting across my desk. The briefcase sat open, the binder inside organized and precise. The complaint, the filings, the printout of Patricia's own forged minutes. Everything was ready. By evening, the board would gather in the Willow Heights Community Hall for the so-called emergency ratification meeting. She thought it would be her redemption. It was going to be her trap. I spent the morning making final preparations at a new location, the county records office downtown. It wasn't crowded, just the dull rhythm of printers and the faint echo of heels on marble floors. I waited by the counter as a clerk printed the certified verification I'd requested, proof that no health compliance standards amendment had ever been filed under Willow Heights. The woman stamped it with the county seal and slid it across the counter. "Keep this safe," she said. "This kind of thing usually means someone's in deep trouble." I gave a small, tired smile. Oh, they are. When I left the building, the heat hit like static. My phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message, but I knew the sender. She's rewriting the agenda. No resident comments allowed tonight. Patricia was closing every door she could before the walls collapsed. I typed back quickly. "Doesn't matter. She won't control who shows up." Back home, I checked the time. 5 hours until the meeting. Marissa was pacing the living room, nerves coiled tight beneath her calm exterior. "She's going to turn the neighbors against you," she said. "You know that, right?" I nodded. "That's fine. They'll see the truth by the end." She stopped pacing and looked at me. Really looked at me, like she was searching for the man I used to be before this fight. "You've changed," she whispered. "You don't sound angry anymore." I smiled faintly. "That's because I'm certain." At 3 o'clock, I loaded the binder into the car and drove toward the community hall. It stood at the end of Magnolia Loop, the heart of Willow Heights, a pristine building with a brick facade and a polished brass plaque. Inside, rows of chairs were already being set up, the air thick with tension. Patricia was there, of course, clipboard in hand, hair immaculate, smile surgically fixed in place. When she saw me, her expression flickered, just for a second, then reset to that false warmth she used like perfume. "Mr. Ward," she said sweetly, "I hope you plan to keep things civil this evening." I met her gaze evenly. "That depends on whether you plan to keep things legal." Her smile froze. "Careful," she said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. "Accusations without evidence are considered defamation." I leaned closer. "Then you'll want to make sure your county filings back you up." Her composure cracked, only slightly, but I caught it. She turned away, barking orders at a volunteer to set up extra seating. I watched her pace across the room, every movement sharp, desperate to project control, but the whispering had already started. People were noticing the tension, the way her voice trembled when she thought no one was listening. By 6, the hall was full. Neighbors filled the seats, curious and uneasy. Marissa sat in the back row, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Liam wasn't there yet, and for a moment, panic sparked in my chest. Then the side door opened, and he walked in carrying a small manila envelope. He didn't look at me, didn't need to. That envelope was enough. Patricia opened the meeting with her usual flourish, thanking residents for their commitment to health and harmony. Her tone dripped with artificial grace. "Tonight," she announced, "we will be voting to confirm previously approved wellness amendments for consistency with our long-standing standards." The crowd murmured. She smiled wider. "No further discussion necessary." That was my cue. I rose from my seat, binder in hand. "Point of order," I said calmly. Heads turned. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "This meeting violates county compliance law," I continued, my voice steady. "You're attempting to ratify an amendment that does not exist in the official record." A ripple went through the room. Patricia laughed, brittle and forced. "Mr. Ward, please sit down. You're misinformed." That's when the back doors opened, and 2 officials from the county compliance office stepped inside, badges visible, clipboards in hand. Every head turned. Patricia's laugh faltered mid-breath. One of the officers scanned the room before saying, "We're here to observe proceedings per resident request. Please continue." For the first time, Patricia looked unsure. She straightened her papers, her fingers trembling slightly. Liam caught my eye from across the room, nodding once. The evidence was safe, the complaint filed, the observers present. Every piece of the plan had fallen into place. The storm was about to break, and Patricia Calloway had just realized she was standing in the open. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fans. Patricia's eyes darted between the two county officials standing near the back wall and the audience she'd spent years controlling. Her voice, usually so sharp and confident, wavered. "Thank you for attending, officers," she said, trying to steady herself. "We're simply clarifying old records for administrative consistency." The lead compliance officer, a tall woman with a badge clipped to her jacket, raised an eyebrow. "Then you won't mind if we record the session for transparency." Patricia's lips twitched into a brittle smile. "Of course not." I watched her sit, smoothing her skirt, as if that small gesture could hold her power together. The other board members shifted uncomfortably, exchanging uncertain glances. They hadn't expected witnesses. I took my seat again, binder in my lap, pulse steady. I didn't need to speak yet. The law would do the heavy lifting. Patricia began reading the amendment confirmation statement, her tone dripping with forced calm. She recited clauses that didn't exist, phrases she'd invented: resident physical compliance, wellness decorum maintenance, visual standard enforcement. Each one more absurd than the last. The officers began taking notes. She didn't notice, too busy talking. I glanced at Liam. He was seated 2 rows back, manila envelope at his feet, his expression blank, but his hands clasped so tightly the knuckles were white. When Patricia finished, she looked around the room expectantly. "All in favor of ratifying the amendment as previously passed, say aye." Silence. A few uncomfortable coughs, but not a single voice. Her smile tightened. I heard you," I said, standing. "But before anyone votes, we need to address something first." She straightened in her chair. "You're out of order, Mr. Ward." "No," I said, holding up the binder. "You are." The compliance officer gave a slight nod, granting me permission to speak. Patricia's jaw flexed. "You've claimed this amendment was approved last quarter," I continued, flipping the binder open to the printed minutes Liam had provided. "According to these records, your records, you dictated that approval. Without a quorum." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "And yet," I said, holding up the certified county document, "there is no record of this amendment being filed or notarized as required by Texas HOA Law Section 209.006, which means every fine, every restriction, and every order tied to this so-called policy is void." The sound that followed wasn't outrage, it was recognition. The crowd's whispers turned sharp, angry, disbelieving. Patricia's hands froze on the table. "You can't prove that," she said, voice rising. "Actually," came a voice from the back, "he can." Liam stood, lifting the manila envelope. His voice trembled but didn't break. "These are the unedited meeting minutes, dated and time-stamped before you change them." He walked to the front and handed the envelope directly to the officer. "The digital metadata shows your edits occurred 3 weeks later, after the secretary refused to sign." Patricia stood so fast her chair scraped the tile. "You had no right to access those files," she snapped. "You violated confidentiality." Liam didn't flinch. "I protected evidence," he said. "You falsified it." The compliance officer opened the envelope, examined the documents, then turned to Patricia. "Mrs. Calloway, these records are consistent with a breach of HOA procedural law and fraudulent misrepresentation. You understand the severity of this?" Patricia's face drained of color. "This is a misunderstanding," she said weakly. "We were updating language, nothing more." "Then why did you issue fines based on an unfiled policy?" I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at the crowd, at the cameras recording from residents' phones, at the walls that used to protect her. For the first time, she looked small. The officer signaled to her colleague, who stepped forward to collect all electronic records from the HOA laptop. "Pending investigation, you are instructed to suspend all enforcement activities," the officer said firmly. Patricia tried to speak, but her words caught somewhere between a sob and a gasp. The other board members quietly rose from their seats, some moving toward the back of the room, distancing themselves from her. Marissa, sitting in the last row, reached for my hand. Her grip was steady, warm, certain. Patricia's empire was collapsing in real time, not through shouting or threats, but through paper, logic, and exposure. I met Liam's eyes, and for the first time, he smiled, faintly but freely. As the officers gathered documents, Patricia sat back down, hands trembling. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I was trying to make this place better." The officer paused, looking down at her. "Ma'am, that's not how the law works." The crowd began to applaud, not loud, not wild, but steady. The kind of applause that says, "We saw everything." Patricia's eyes glistened. She didn't cry out or argue again. She just stared at the table, as if trying to read her power one last time from the empty space where her rules used to be. The applause built slowly, like a wave rolling through the room. At first it was just a few claps, uncertain, cautious, but then it spread. People who had once whispered behind fences and avoided eye contact were standing, cheering, phones raised to record what they knew would become the moment Patricia Calloway finally lost her crown. The county officers didn't stop it. They just watched quietly as the sound filled the community hall, echoing off the polished walls that once hosted her smug speeches about civic pride. Patricia sat motionless at the board table, lips trembling, eyes darting like she could still find a way out if she just said the right words. "Enough!" she shouted finally, slamming her palm against the wood. "This is still my meeting." The noise died instantly. "I built this community," she continued, voice cracking. "Without me, none of this, none of you would have any order." I stepped forward, binder still in hand, feeling the room tilt toward me. "You didn't build this place, Patricia," I said evenly. "You built a cage and called it a neighborhood." The crowd erupted again, louder this time. Neighbors stood from every row, people she'd fined for holiday lights, written up for mailbox colors, scolded for improper landscaping. Their stories spilled out all at once. "She charged me $500 for leaving a tricycle on my porch. She made my husband mow our yard twice in one day. She called my kid's wheelchair an obstruction." Each accusation landed like thunder, shaking the walls of her empire. Patricia tried to shout them down, but her voice broke beneath the sound. "Lies!" she screamed. "You're all liars." Liam stood near the back, the quietest voice in the room, but the one that silenced everyone when he spoke. "I'm not lying, Patricia." His tone was steady, heavy with finality. "You made me falsify votes. You told me to hide letters from residents who challenged you. You made this community afraid." Her head snapped toward him, disbelief flickering into rage. "You ungrateful little coward," she hissed. "I gave you that job." He didn't flinch. "And you taught me exactly what not to become." The room went silent again. For a moment, there was no sound but the whir of the ceiling fans. Patricia's breath came in short bursts, face pale, eyes wild. She turned toward me like I was the one who had started all of it. "You think you're some kind of hero?" she spat. "You think this makes you better?" "No," I said quietly. "It makes us free." The words seemed to hang in the air, and then the applause returned, louder than before. People began chanting, "No more fines, no more lies." Someone shouted, "Vote her out," and the rest picked it up. The board members, sensing the inevitable, huddled, together, whispering. The vice president, a middle-aged man with glasses and a nervous expression, finally stood. "Effective immediately," he said, voice shaking. "I motion for a vote of removal for President Calloway on grounds of misconduct and procedural fraud." The room went still again, as if the air itself waited for her to respond. Patricia stared at him, jaw slack, disbelief turning into cold fury. "You can't do this," she whispered. "You don't have the authority." The compliance officer stepped forward. "Actually, under state HOA code, they do." She looked at the board. "All in favor?" Hands went up one by one. The vice president, the treasurer, even the secretary who had once been too afraid to speak. Then Liam raised his hand too, slowly, deliberately. Patricia didn't move. Her hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles went white. "You'll regret this," she said, but her voice was thin, almost pleading. I set the binder down on the table in front of her. You've spent years making people regret standing up to you. It's over now. She looked at the binder like it was poison. Then, for the first time since I'd met her, she broke. The mask slipped and tears spilled down her face. Not theatrical ones, but raw, silent ones. She sank back into her chair, as if gravity had finally remembered her. The compliance officer made it official. By unanimous vote of the Willow Heights Board and under county observation, Patricia Calloway is hereby suspended pending full state review. The room erupted. The applause was deafening, cathartic, a collective exhale from people who'd held their breath for too long. Marissa was on her feet, clapping through tears. Liam leaned against the wall, exhausted, but smiling. Even the officers seemed relieved to witness justice play out so cleanly. Patricia stood unsteadily, looking around at faces she used to command. "You'll all thank me one day," she said softly, almost to herself, "when you realize order was all that kept you safe." "No," I said, as she walked out under the weight of every eye in the room. "Decency does that." The doors closed behind her. The echo lingered, but the fear that used to fill this hall was gone. It had been replaced by something stronger: solidarity. The echo of the closing doors faded, leaving behind a quiet that felt foreign to Willow Heights. For years, Patricia's voice had been the background noise of this community. Every meeting, every warning letter, every whispered threat. Now there was only silence, thick and uncertain, but full of possibility. I stood at the front of the community gym, the same place where it had all begun, where humiliation had once been dressed up as policy. Tonight, it felt different. The lights glowed warmer, the mirrors were uncovered, and laughter echoed faintly from the back as neighbors talked freely for the first time in years. The next morning, Patricia's name was removed from the HOA email header. The county's investigation moved quickly, faster than anyone expected. The compliance officers confirmed what we already knew: no record of a health compliance amendment, falsified minutes, and unauthorized fines totaling over $30,000. Every penalty she'd issued was reversed, every non-compliant resident formally cleared. It wasn't revenge, it was restoration. Marissa and I watched the announcement go live on the community portal. She exhaled slowly, relief softening her features. "It's over," she whispered. I nodded, but the word didn't feel complete yet. Over meant healed, and Willow Heights still had scars. That's when I suggested something new. "Let's rebuild this place into what it was supposed to be," I said. Not controlled, not fearful, just real. 2 weeks later, the board reconvened under county supervision to elect an interim president. To my surprise, Liam nominated me. "You understand the rules better than anyone," he said simply. "And you know what happens when they're abused." I hesitated. I never wanted a title. Titles were what corrupted people like Patricia. But this wasn't about power anymore. It was about safeguarding peace. I accepted on one condition. The first policy we passed would abolish all appearance-based regulations. No fines for body image, no pseudo-wellness clauses, no control disguised as care. The motion passed unanimously. The gym, once a symbol of humiliation, became our first project. We cleared out Patricia's old posters, painted over her slogans about visual harmony, and replaced them with a new banner: "Everybody at Willow." Marissa stood beside me when we hung it, smiling through quiet tears. The next weekend, we hosted the first real community event. A simple one. No wellness parade, no photo contests, just neighbors sharing food under the warm Texas sky. Kids chalked drawings on the sidewalks Patricia used to police for cracks. Elderly residents brought folding chairs and lemonade. For the first time, no one worried about being watched. Even Liam showed up, a little lighter, a little freer. When I thanked him publicly for his courage, he shook his head. "You're the one who made the system listen," he said. "I just gave it a voice." As the sun dipped low, I stood with Marissa near the gym entrance. The laughter outside mixed with the low hum of crickets, a sound that finally felt like peace. "You really did it," she said. "You fought her with paperwork." I smiled. That's the thing about bullies. They never expect you to read the fine print. Later that night, when the crowd dispersed, I walked through the gym one last time. The smell of fresh paint still lingered. I stopped at the mirror where Patricia had once told Marissa she wasn't fit for community presentation. The glass reflected both of us now, different, unbroken. "She'll never take this from you again," I said softly. Marissa slipped her hand into mine. "She never really could," she whispered. Word spread fast beyond Willow Heights. Other neighborhoods started calling, asking for copies of the audit filings, wanting to know how we'd done it. The county even began reviewing its oversight procedures, citing the Willow Heights incident as precedent. Patricia's reign had ended, but her downfall had started something larger, a reminder that even the most rigid systems can bend when people refuse to stay silent. That night, I placed the binder, the same one that held her fake minutes and my complaint, on the highest shelf of my office. Not as a trophy, but as a warning. Rules matter, but only when they protect, not control. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now. Share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.